voices.
Our inner voices.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world listening to this. The date is today is 16th of April, 2020. As you can imagine, we've been locked down for quite a few weeks now. Some people at least more than a month. So, being the host of Our Inner Voices, I figured I needed to speak to my people around the world and see what was happening with other people in other situations. With that being said, I've with that being said, I present to you the COV-POV series. COV-POV, you say? Yes. COV-POV is the coronavirus point of view, and we'll be speaking to a few people from a couple different countries around the world just to get their insight. Our first episode today will be featuring James. You don't know James, don't worry. James went to University of Nottingham. That's where we met a couple years back. And James currently lives and teaches in China. So we spoke to James the second week of March, just to get an idea of how the situation in China was at the time, because a lot of people in Europe and African countries had only just started to catch up with what was actually going on. James gave some really interesting insights, which I do hope you guys enjoy. And if anybody has any questions, any feedback, anything like that, please let me know. If you want to like, share, subscribe, please do.
Good evening, James. It's 10 p.m. in what part of China are you in right now?
I'm in Shenzhen, which, if you don't know where that is, it's about,
I don't.
it's about like 5 miles north of Hong Kong. It's like the other side of the border in the south.
Okay, and thank you for joining us on our Inner Voices today. This is usually a show where we just usually chop up how life is going between young people, but obviously we're in this like special time. So like I've nicknamed this series the COV-POV. Which is basically it's basically the COV point of view.
Okay, definitely sticks in the mind.
Exactly.
Happy to be on the show, mate. Thank you for having me.
So, can you just introduce yourself to the listeners, James?
All right. So, I've been living in South China for 2.5 years now, coming up on 3. Came out here to teach English for 6 months with a couple of friends. They've since gone. Not for me, I'm out of here, but loving it. It's nice and warm, stays sunny, occasional bouts of pandemic. But other than that, very pleasant, very enjoyable. Would recommend it.
Fair enough. Occasional bouts of pandemic. That sounds like...
You know, in England it rains, here you die. It's fine.
It just sounds like a bit of rain here and there, some acid rain, you know.
It could be worse.
Okay, and obviously, so you are in the country where this is rumored to have started. So what month, let's paint the picture. What month did you first get wind of this virus?
So it kicked off in, like, you started hearing things in early January. But
Okay.
in terms of, people are getting sick. But China's a big place, and it's kicking off in Hubei, which is, it's a few provinces north, But to put it in perspective, if this were Europe, it would be a few countries away. So it was pretty easy to ignore it, right? Because Hubei, like the province that got locked down, that's 60 million people. That's a country.
That's England.
Yeah, that's England, right? So it was kind of easy to ignore because there's, let me think, Guangdong, Hunan. It's think of it as being like in Poland, and that's how far away it was when it started. And if news doesn't travel that fast in China unless it's government approved, if you know what I mean. So
I see.
yeah, let's just leave it at that, shall we say? So it took a while to really get an idea of what was unfolding. So for the first 2 weeks, I wasn't taking it very seriously. And then January 23rd was when they locked down Wuhan. And then everyone got a bit more panicky. That's when they started like panic buying masks and stuff. And then, but I left the country on the 24th. So like when I came back, it was like they were in the heat of it. So yeah, it was just as it was ramping out. I took off for a week, and when I came back, it was just full on. So like, end of January was when it got serious.
And in the area you were in, what were the first set of measures that were put in place that actually directly affected you?
So I came back in on, I think it's the 2nd of February. So that by that point, coming from the airport to my flat, which is like an hour's drive, I think we stopped at checkpoints 4 or 5 times, and at each one you've got temperature checks, people checking passports. You had to wear a mask if you took outside anywhere. If you didn't, you got arrested. So yeah, that's the sort of, and bear in mind, when I left 9 days before, there were no measures. They went from 0 to 100 real quick. So I had to register online to get back into my apartment block. And it was like at 4 a.m. and they've got these lads shouting at me in Chinese. I've come back from a holiday. I'm like, I don't really want to translate. Let me think. What are you talking about? What do you want? So yeah, it was basically full on like electronic documentation of where everyone is at all times, masks, checkpoints. Anyone with a slightly unusual temperature gets taken off to hospital. And taken, not asked, let's be clear.
This is the worst time for allergy season.
Oh, mate, no, horrendous. Yeah, you do not want to be sneezing. Like, the word hay fever is not in the Chinese vocabulary. It's like, hey, that sneezy guy looks kind of dodgy. Nah.
And so for you personally, because you're in a country that's not your home country, and then suddenly these measures are in place, it must feel like there's a war going on, or like aliens have just landed. Did these measures, when you started to realize how serious it was, were you scared, or how did you react? Did you not care, or?
So you know how there were a lot of people going, it's not a big deal, it's just the flu. If you're young, you'll be fine, right? You hear people doing that in England, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Right, and then obviously the response to that is, but there's so many people here that okay, it's not about you, it's about protecting your grandparents. Well, imagine if you didn't have that thing. Like, I don't know the old people here. So it was a bit easier to be more relaxed because it wasn't a big threat to me. And everyone I know here is in their 20s, young and healthy. So initially, it was easy to be relaxed about. And again, you weren't getting a lot of information at that point because kind of hard to get information out of the city in lockdown. You know what I mean? So it still took a while for like the severity to sink in.
Fair enough. And I can imagine the people you're teaching are not the oldest members of society, and your grandparents are like thousands of miles across the world.
Right, yeah. So relatively unstressed from that point. And to be honest, like it was only yesterday, the day before, that we started getting some new numbers, like videos of the crematoriums and stuff. Because the official death toll I think for China's like 3,200 and something.
That's what they say.
Yeah, and like it's very clearly, it's an open secret that that's not true. Like right now, I think 2 days ago, because they've just started releasing the ashes from the crematoriums. I think they've got 8 crematoriums releasing 550 a day for the next, I want to say 8 days. So you can do the maths there and go and realize that is not 3,000.
Yeah, Italy definitely does not have more cases than China.
100. No, probably not. I mean, they did do a really good job. I don't know anyone who caught it. Like they did a really good job of limiting it to that one province, but there are 60 million people in that province. There is no way that only 80,000 of them caught it.
And the thing is, I feel like when we look at this situation, to be fair to China, it's not, the country is so massive, like you've just said. Like it's a crazy task to ask them to figure out a way to not allow this virus to spread around the whole country. And for them to have contained it to the extent they have, it's actually mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's genuinely impressive. Like, I think the thing that was fighting against them initially is the provincial governments, they don't want to look bad in front of Beijing. So unless they have to tell Beijing there's a problem, they're not telling Beijing anything. So there was a good couple of weeks where they were trying to manage it by themselves and keeping it on the down low. And then eventually they had to admit to Beijing that, look, we've got a situation here. Beijing gave the shutdown order, and at that point, they did a reasonably good job from there on. But the problem is that because they've got this government blame culture, that it's not, you don't go to your boss with a problem. You try and go there with a solution. So once they got over that bit, I think they did do a reasonable job. But there's still do not believe the numbers coming out.
Because the thing is, I feel you've just touched on something so important that most people don't realize about China. And that's that China's system of ruling is not like the European democratic system, or the democratic system, in Europe and the West. It's more like when you're in charge of a province, it's almost like you said, you don't go to your boss who is actually in charge of, who's in Beijing. You don't go to the source and announce it. You try to fix the problem. So most of the time, they never actually hear what's going on in your province.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So whereas
whereas
people are saying like there was a massive cover-up and stuff, in reality, there probably was a cover-up, but that was the province where this started, covering it up from the main government.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably, think of it kind of like a domino effect. Each layer of reporting takes a little bit off. So you've got, each person underreports by 5%, but as you go up the hierarchy, they're knocking off little bits each time, and that just compounds into a bigger underreporting.
Because they know how much shit is coming when the top hears it.
Yeah, I mean, all the top leaders in Wuhan got replaced quite early on, once it became clear the extent of it, because the guys who suppressed, I don't know if you got much of that, but like there were a bunch of Wuhan doctors who were calling it out quite early on, and they got discredited and fired.
Oh, we heard about that.
Right. But see, about 2 weeks after that, the government officials who did the discrediting got fired.
Wow.
Because, well, because in terms of it makes Beijing look like they're on top of it, they're taking action. So everyone's moving the blame around. It's just a kind of a question of who's holding it when it goes off. Kind of like pass the parcel, but with a pandemic.
Jesus Christ. And okay, so that's very interesting, and the perspective you've just given from a political point of view. I was going to ask, with all the people I'm speaking to today, you're kind of in the opposite scenario, which is the other people I've spoken to, they're from the countries they're currently in the countries they're originally from. So for you being a British citizen and hearing about how quickly this was starting to spread in England, how did that increase your sense of anxiety and worry for family and friends back home?
Yeah, no, obviously, because obviously we went through UK went through various stages, right? There was a couple of days where all the news was about herd immunity, and then it was about flattening the curve, and then it was about, okay, no, we actually need to shut this down now. And it definitely felt like they went through various stages which weren't working. And so, yeah, obviously nervous. But fortunately, I guess in some sense, my mum and my sister have already had it and they seem fine. So that kind of took the heat off a bit early, if you know what I mean. Because
Okay.
yeah, like one of my big concern points, my brother, I assume is immortal because he's been hanging out with them, has shown no symptoms. But yeah, like people I would be instantly concerned about got it really quickly and were fine. So that took some of the, like obviously took some of the concern out of it for me, which would otherwise have been massively increased by being so far away. And it's not like I can get there at the moment because all the borders are closed.
That's very true. Like
Yeah.
I actually had a friend. He was in Mexico when this started, and he flew back to England because he was so worried about not being with his family during the period.
Mm.
And okay, so the final thing I'd like to ask you is, obviously this has affected the whole world, and everybody has had to have like a standstill. For you personally, whether professionally, mental health wise, financially, what has been the biggest loss that this lockdown has how is yeah what has been the biggest loss you've experienced during this lockdown?
I would say the most thing is like I've been really just disappointed.
Disappointed.
In terms,
Okay.
just like no matter where you look, people have been acting like idiots. So you
It's
got
very
for people in England attacking people for being Chinese who weren't even Chinese. You know, people from nearby countries. Right now, people, because the only cases in China are imported cases right now, are avoiding me in the supermarket because I'm foreign, and now they're scared it's coming the other way. People buying a year's supply of toilet paper. Like, it really has. Like, there's been some awesome stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like some great acts of generosity. All the people jumping to volunteer for the NHS, some great stuff. But it's also highlighted just some really kind of shitty behaviour, just in terms of prejudice or panic or just irrational behaviour everywhere in the world. China, America, everywhere. So it's been a little bit disheartening in that regard.
like I can see what you mean. Like the other day I was in Sainsbury's, and they had just got an order in, and there was this guy. He was like maybe 6'5", quite a large guy. He had this what was it called? He had this basket, and he was stuffing it with ice cream. And like I just wanted to get one. I just wanted to get a Ben and Jerry's. So
Yeah, just a
I was being
little.
polite. Exactly, I was being polite. Like, okay, let me wait for him to finish, and then I have my turn. He was literally. I was just like, wow. He was like, he had like maybe 10 tubs of Ben and Jerry's, different types of ice cream, and then he looked back at me, and I promise you, he had this look in his eyes, like it felt like when he looked at me for a second, the madness went away, and the humanity came back, and he just slowed down, and he just like slowly put the last one in the basket. And I just looked at him and just was like, damn, you're just gonna kill yourself because of the coronavirus, because this is just sugar you're about to
Just
pour
weird,
into.
isn't it? Just odd stuff. And that's such a weird thing to stockpile as well. Like,
Ice cream.
yeah, it's like, man, like pasta, rice, I get it, right? Toilet paper, even to a certain extent. I think it's ridiculous, but I can see the train of thought. Ice cream? Really?
It's like the world is ending. Let's rush and just like Fuck it, let's end it ourselves.
But that's mental. That is ridiculous. Actually, you know what? I actually have a question for you.
Of course.
So you've obviously you've spoken to a few other people. What were their primary concerns? Because I'm guessing it's going to be mostly economic, because everything's shut down, right?
Okay, so that's a good question. So the first thing is I've spoken to people in South Korea. I've spoken to people in Italy, Spain, and out of those 3 interviews I've done, my friend in South Korea, her biggest concern was for her family because she came from England. She was schooling in London, so she had to go back to South Korea during this period. So she's not actually with her family. So they're in the same city, but she has to quarantine with her brother in a separate house. So it kind of hurts, like you can imagine, it kind of hurts that you're flown all the way back because you're concerned for your family, but now you can't even see your family.
Yeah, so close but so far.
Then the guy in Spain, he's a musician. He works for the orchestra. So for him, his biggest loss hasn't been money because they're paying him. His biggest loss has been the human interaction, like going out and interacting with people. Because in Spain, the lockdown is still in full effect. So I guess for him, it's like a bit of his sanity.
Yeah. Just those same 4 walls.
And then my friend in Italy, her biggest concern so far has been for the medical staff because she has a lot of friends and family members who work in the medical profession. And she's been speaking to them quite a lot during this period. And her biggest worry is that they're actively doctors risking their lives to they're opening themselves up to infection. Some doctors have died, and it's getting to a point in Italy where they're starting to be like, if this goes any further, we're going to have to start deciding who gets the treatment. So for them, it's quite the reality is quite grim, and also she's not able to be with her family because her parents are a bit older, so they need to be
Isolate,
away
sure,
from
yeah.
her. So overall, it's been a lot of different perspectives on how this is affecting people. But the main thing is it's really affecting everyone, man.
Yeah, it's mad. One last thing I was going to point out, because I don't know if it's been mentioned in the West, but certainly on Chinese social media, there's kind of like people postulating that, the Marshall Plan, post-World War II aid from America to all the Western countries.
Is it like martial law when people were asked to stay at home?
No, that's a different spelling in Marshall. So after World War II, obviously, all of Europe's economy was non-existent down the toilet, right? America came in with a huge amount of loans called the Marshall Plan, and propped up these economies, and that's when the dollar became the global currency. That's when it overtook the pound. It's kind of when you can pinpoint that America became the world power. There's a fair bit of suggestion on Chinese social media that China will, because they've contained it reasonably early, their economy will keep pumping while everyone else is in shutdown, that they might try something similar where they come in, lend everyone a bunch of money, own all their debt, and therefore give the European countries the buying power to carry on buying the Chinese goods, because obviously the Chinese do big production. They're then going to be, so they'll need to keep that going at the same time, have a similar effect, where they own huge amounts of European and American debt, and it's going to wind up being a huge boost for the Chinese in that regard. No idea if it's true. You hear a lot of stuff on Chinese social media, but it's something that they're discussing at the moment. Could be very interesting in 6 months.
I find that quite interesting because I was actually speaking to someone about this a few days ago. It feels like no one is actually trying. It feels like most people are not looking at the obvious economic ramifications this is going to have. And I think the biggest problem that comes out of that is the West naturally will not want to cede economic power and monopoly to China. But the way things are going, that might be the only solution. Because if you're
China's working its way through Africa on a similar basis over the last few years, lending money, taking ports. Like it would be in obviously the West wouldn't want to do it, but it depends how long this goes on for, how much things crash, how much choice they have. So it could be very interesting.
I think that's where the conspiracy theories start to walk in.
Well, I mean, I would hope no one would start a global pandemic for that, but that's you would hope. That's presumably that's probably a topic for another time.
Yeah, that's a topic for like when you're out of China.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that the Chinese government don't watch Inner Voices, but if you don't hear from me again, we'll know why.
Our inner voices.